My guest has taken Dungeons & Dragons into the final frontier.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the show where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. Hey guys, I've been doing this show for a while and I am having a blast. I really enjoy putting these episodes together. It has been a great pleasure to talk to so many interesting people, and I just look forward to having so many more guests on this show. The concept for this show is that we can become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. Of course, I say that almost every week. But what I mean by that is not only do I want to talk to game masters, role players, RPG designers, I want to talk to other people as well. We want to fill ourselves with mythology, literature, movies, filmmaking, writing advice, all of these things that can come together and allow us to tell better stories at the table. If you want to check out something, I have released a free campaign setting called The King's Road. The PDF version is free. It is on DriveThruRPG. You can just go to drivethrurpg.com and type in The King's Road, and you can have a fantasy campaign that you can use at your table. Now, today's guest has really taken the open game license content of Dungeons & Dragons and really pushed the setting really, really far into some new and fantastic directions. So let's learn about Spaceships and Starwyrms. My guest today is the co-designer of Spaceships and Starwyrms, Ben Quiggins. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
What is Spaceships and Starwyrms?
Okay, so Spaceships and Starwyrms is a science fiction fantasy expansion to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So it takes the open gaming license of 5th edition and the basic rules there and transforms it into its own sci-fi game with its own sci-fi universe and setting that's new and unique, with new species and classes and spells and monsters and so on.
Okay, so it is an original system built off of 5e. It's not like a supplement to 5e.
You could treat it like a supplement if you wanted to play it that way. The core content being from the OGL of 5th edition means that they are cross-compatible. So you could take stuff from Spaceships and Starwyrms and use it at your 5e fantasy game table, or vice versa, with complete compatibility, because the basic rules are the same. The new stuff that it brings to the table, however, is all made from scratch. We have new skills to have been made, new classes that didn't exist before, a system for vehicles and spaceships and space travel and all of the other things that sci-fi encompasses that regular D&D just doesn't have anything. Well, this system helps it have those things. And then on top of that, we built a brand new setting to play in, an entire galaxy to explore, the Nakora Galaxy, and all the creatures and species within, to take your adventures to the stars, essentially.
Could you tell us more about the galaxy setting you created?
Yeah, of course. So the Nakora Galaxy is somewhere out there in the universe. And in this particular galaxy, there is magic provided by dark matter particles, which are charged and uncharged with the flow of power. And so pretty much everybody across the galaxy can access magic. And some of the cultures of the species in the core planet sectors have grown to their technological maturity as a magical society. And then others where perhaps the dark matter density wasn't as powerful grew more from a technological side of things. So you have this intermixing cultures of people like the Quiggins, which are these almost goblinoid people from a world that's been hollowed out and is a giant city and has a very, very heavy cyberpunk themes to it in its capitalist overstructure and pure technology and body modification, interacting with a group of people like the Hanadarians, which are from the planet Hanadar, which is a very magical world. It's a rogue planet that doesn't rotate around a star, exists only because magic continues life there. And these people are obsessed with planar travel and the mysteries of magic, and their spaceships themselves fly using magic rather than like an engine, if you will. And so the Nakora Galaxy is a crosshair of cultures like that, primarily of roughly 10 cultures. Each of the major species that are playable has their own culture that they bring to the table. And the galaxy, we've kind of built a history to it of when various people have gotten to space and what has happened as they've interacted. And so you could play anywhere along this 4,000-year timeline, or you can play in what we consider to be the present day of the setting, which is when our modules that we're writing and releasing will take place. And the timeline gives you an idea of how the cultures have melded together and how these peoples have kind of grown into a community that mixes elements of fantasy and elements of science fiction of various kinds. Because our goal was to build a galaxy where you could have all sorts of adventures. So in the core sectors, you can have these very high-tech fantasy adventures or sci-fi adventures. You know, you can live your Star Wars style dreams. You can do cyberpunk noir on the planet of Kygor, or you could go and do very powerful magic, like high magic to the point of it being technology on the planet of Izon. Or you can move out to the frontier systems where things are still being explored and there are pioneers and there's less technology, and you get more of like a space western feel from the game, where if you want to play a game that has a reminiscent taste of like Firefly, you can do that there. And then even further out, you have the outer reaches, the unexplored parts of space, where if you take a group there, you might be in for a terrifying space horror or a Star Trek-like adventure exploring spaces never seen before.
Could you go into a little bit more detail on some of the playable races? I'm sure you have a number of, you said 10?
So 10 primary cultures with some sub-races and whatnot. And so some of the big ones I'll just hit on. So I mentioned the planet of Izon, and on Izon you have the Izonites. So Izon as a planet was subsumed by its own supernova-ing sun before it collapsed. And this coincided with an unprecedented magical event of potent dark matter that caused the planet to not be destroyed. So when the sun collapsed and became a white dwarf, Izon, the planet, was left still rotating, orbiting around it in a tidal locked way. And not too long after that, these beings started just being created out of the essence of the magic of the planet. And they are these creatures made of fire and stone and magma called the Izonites. They are short-lived sentient species that really values community and learning and experiences. And they love to explore the galaxy. And so they're very fast, and they make, of course, good magic users as well, being from a culture that was essentially created from the essence of magic. And then we have, I mentioned Kygor. Kygor is a goblinoid species that come in two forms. One's much taller and one's much shorter. If you want to play a goblin or an orc in space, they're a really good option for that kind of feel. And then on top of that, they get a lot of boosts to their intelligence, and they get free cyberware to mod out their body if they want to. Archetypically, they're very good with computers, given their society is incredibly high-tech And then we move to another magical species. There's the Bravash, which will give me a chance to talk a little bit about Starwyrms, which is one of the namesakes of the game. Starwyrms are these enormous, almost moon-sized space dragons that kind of float through space, and they recycle the magic in the galaxy. It's why the magic hasn't been drained away by people using it, is they eat used up dark matter and re-emit empowered magical charged particles again. Well, the larval state of the starworm is a playable species called the Bravash. And there are these hulking, almost 9-foot tall, lizard-like alien species that grew up knowing that once they pass their larval stage of their life, after maybe a few hundred to 1,000 years, they would cocoon up and someday be reborn as a starworm and leave the planet to the stars. So, of course, it was only a matter of time before they themselves, in their larval state, also achieved spaceflight. So they have a strange place in the galaxy where everybody knows that we need the starworms, otherwise magic will die out, and that it would be a really bad thing for a lot of cultures. But also, the starworms are maybe the future of these people that you might be friends with. And I guess I'll touch on one more of the more technological savvy races. I'll talk a little bit about the Paranthi. The Paranthi are so they come from a planet very far from their sun, encased in ice, but beneath the ice is a ocean superheated by the center of their planet. And they are a native to underwater species that looks a little bit like, a little bit of your classic merfolk looking person with smooth skin that's more dolphin-y than with like scales. And they specialize in technology that uses magmatic force and thermal power. And so like the depiction of them in the book, you'll see them holding a pair of their unique magma guns that charge up via heat and have these heat cores. And so that's just a bit of a taste. We also have things like I mentioned the Hanadarians. They're kind of a spindly, almost uncanny looking space elves of sorts, space elf Slendermen. We've got the Proxy, which are a playable robot species. If you want to play a robot or android, that's totally there for you. The Uther, which are these Cyclops eye stalk, smaller species. We have the Luantua, which are these almost birds of prey and how they look. They're winged and such, and so on and so forth. We do also, I guess I should say, have humans, but they are pointedly not necessarily the focus of the galaxy. We didn't want the humans to be the default, and so we even include a new human racial template for if you want to be a human, these are the racial features you get. That's very different from how regular 5th edition has approached it, to try and make them feel like they're their own unique species among all of these unique species and how they fit in.
What about classes?
Our core book sports 5 new classes and 2 of what we call augmented classes, which are just a really different way to look at a class that maybe already existed in 5th edition. And then beyond that, we have a number of new archetypes for the classes that did exist in 5th edition, because, there's nothing wrong with a rogue in space. Maybe it just needs some tweaks. So, we have the lists of, how to change their proficiencies with our new skill system and what kind of weapons they start with and that kind of thing. But as for the brand new classes, what we have are the Marshal, first of all, which is kind of an extrapolation of what the Battlemaster Fighter was a little bit leaning towards in regular 5th edition. The Marshal has a lot of a team player type feel. You do a lot to help your allies. You get special help actions and tactical dice that are meant to incentivize the other members of your party to do better in an almost bardic way. While you tend to be a sufficient fighter, you can get in there and you can do your fighter things, but that's not really the focus. The focus of that class is all about teamwork and how to how well-oiled party just really benefits from having one. And they really shine in the spaceship combat because of how their abilities work over comms and such. After the Marshal, we have the Oracle, which the Oracle was definitely inspired from Pathfinder. If you've ever played it, the Oracle was, I think, in their advanced class guide, but it was one of the favorites of our creative design team. And since the Oracle is in the Pathfinder OGL, we felt comfortable taking some inspiration from that and doing some similar templating with curses and mysteries. And the whole idea of the Oracle as our divine caster that kind of replaces the cleric, because while there is religion in the Nakora Galaxy, its magic has been scientifically looked at so much that it's difficult to say what is divine magic and what is arcane. And the oracles gave us a chance to, with their powers being driven by a mystery of the universe, to kind of reach into what would divine magic be in our setting. And the answer was the Oracle, where they have a grand mystery like time or conflict or life, and they draw all their power from their revelations about those mysteries and requesting magic from the galaxy itself in a way that more arcane casters and more scientific magic users don't do that. After the Oracle is the Scion. The Scion is a kind of a mixed class where they have some spellcasting utility and also the ability to fight. I would kind of akin them to an arcane paladin, I guess, if you're familiar with 5th edition, where they get spellcasting, although their spellcasting is specifically psionics, so psychic powers, that sort of thing. They get these special implants in their brain, which awaken their powers in specific ways. And so you end up with psychic warriors that have telekinesis or can throw up force shields or can read people's minds or make them be perceived in ways that they wouldn't normally be perceived by other people, and kick a little butt if they need to. Let's see. The Roboticist is the 4th new one. This one is pretty much exactly as it sounds. Like, you build a robot and it fights for you. It is at its heart a companion class, but if you want to live the mech suit dream, you can have your robot be a mech suit instead, and you get inside of it and fight. So you can do the Iron Man thing, or even if you use the special rules for spaceship-sized mechs, you could play a Gundam game if you wanted to. And the entire point of the Roboticist is just to have as many ways to customize your robot as possible to make your robot feel unique and yours. In a way, your character is almost your robot more than it is your character. And that's intentional. And then the last new class is the Scientist, which is sort of a fusion of a wizard and warlock style with a focus on inventions. So instead of casting spells, they create inventions that generate spell effects. So instead of I know magic missile, it's I have developed this firearm that fires the spell magic missile. And you charge up your inventions with a dark matter battery that you basically plug into it to cast the spell. And you so many charges a day, and then your battery charges up by absorbing dark matter from the air over like a long rest. And so it's a very cerebrally rewarding spellcasting class. The spellcasting style of it is, like I said, it's somewhere between the wizard and the warlock. You get those like spell slots that grow with your level, but without some of the limitations that the warlock has. And in return, you tend to lean a little bit more into just being a pure spellcaster than the warlock has, than the warlock's flexibility. And then the augmented classes, I mentioned that they were like our take on how to sci-fi up a D&D classic. Are the Vanguard and the Adept, which are essentially at their core the barbarian and the monk. And so the Vanguard, rather than going into a rage and berserking or anything like that, they are infused with nanomachines that run through their blood. And so whenever you rage, you're nanite charging, and they have special abilities where they can use their nanomachines to talk directly to machines, and it gives them a little bit more of a interaction with the technology of the world, while the adepts are a little bit more Jedi than the average monk. I guess is probably the easiest way to describe them.
Well, I mean, you got to have a Jedi. Come on.
Right, exactly.
Now, you mentioned it a little bit, but about a skill system. Did you make an entirely new skill system, or did you just add different skills?
It's more of adding different skills and taking away some of the ones that were there in order to add in things like computers and mechanics and such that we felt we needed for it to be a sci-fi workable system.
Mm-hmm.
We also had to take away skills that already existed or fold them in other skills, because the 5th edition premise of its complexity level and how they give out skill proficiencies kind of goes along with how many skills that they have allowed in their game. And so we wanted to end up with the same number of skills that they already were using, even if the skills were different. So we have piloting and science and computers and mechanics, and a skill called etiquette in Spaceships and Starwyrms that don't exist in regular 5th edition. And by that extension, there are some skills like religion, which is now part of history, and nature, which is now part of science, and sleight of hand, which is now part of stealth, that had to be removed in order to make room for the new skills. And so there is a whole chapter talking about like the new split of what skills do what and how that differs from 5th edition, so that you can kind of ease into that.
How is faster than light travel handled? You mentioned some magic powered ships and some technology ships, but how is the faster than light handled?
Okay, so generally the way spaceships are structured in SNS, and in the base game at least, is that they have 3 move speed types. The first one is their move speed if they're in a fight. And in that case, they move with a unit of measurement called arcs, where one arc is about 100 feet. And that's how, if you were going to, like, say, play a spaceship battle with a battle map or something, you could do that. Your ship has a speed, whatnot. The next level up is how your ship travels normally. And in that sense, those speeds really aren't described in great detail. They're left kind of more to the imagination of the players and the GM. We have tables for how long will it take you to get from one space system to another space system, or one planet to another within the same system, or one sector to another. Like, we have timelines for that kind of thing to give you an idea of how many days at the speed that your spaceship goes. In general, the ships fly very fast, because we're talking like you can get from one end to a specific star system to the other within a day or two, which is still a lot of space to travel. As far as faster than light and jumping across the entire galaxy in a single blink, that is handled by our wormholes. So we decided, we opted more towards a system of magical / scientific wormholes, which are the various cultures have built these gates around them to kind of stabilize them. And so specific wormholes will go to other specific wormholes once you put in the calculations into the gates, and then move from there. And what that kind of does is it creates these hubs of life and hubs of adventure where ships have to go to these places. If you want to get from, say, Sector 3 in the Frontier to Sector 1 in the Core, you're going to have to go to one of the wormhole gates. And there's a bunch of them in the core sectors. So in the core, when you're playing in that style of game, you almost get to feel like you can just, travel the speed of light whenever you want to, because, well, there's a wormhole gate in every system that matters. Every system with a populated planet has a stabilized wormhole gate. But then out in the Frontier, on the other hand, there's only a couple of gates in each sector. So you might have to travel for more than a month to get to the nearest wormhole gate and then go from there. So it's very different. It adds to that kind of different feel of game as far as that goes.
I guess just a kind of a big question. What inspired you to do all this?
Fair enough. So my partner Audrey and I, this was about 3 years ago, I guess, 3.5 years ago. We played a game where a couple of the players were from space, and they crash landed onto like a fantasy world setting that we play at our home table, and they had an adventure where they were trying to get their spaceship back and fixed and get off this blasted rock. And what ended up happening was everybody really enjoyed the adventure, and when they left in their spaceship, they took their new friends into space, and they had a short space adventure after that. Well, it took a lot of thinking on the fly and like making up stuff as we went to, facilitate jumping from D&D directly into this, sci-fi action. And so when that was done, Audrey and I realized that, it's weird. The 5th edition felt like it translated really nicely with its complexity level and how simple and clean it is into a fun adventure in space. Why isn't there something out there that does that? And I say this now knowing, having, gone through all the process and written the book with her and did all of our publishing and our Kickstarter and everything, that there is a couple of other ones out there now as well. But at the time, we were just like, well, we don't see one, and we're going to do it. So the two of us, we've been writing together a long time, and we love creating stuff, and we love tabletop games, and it just seemed like a no-brainer to just go for it. And what started as us writing more and more stuff so that we could play maybe another one of these space adventures with our friends turned into, well, why don't we just publish this? Turned into, well, why don't we just kickstart this? And it turned into this, which we're really proud of. And we honestly didn't see us at this point 3 years ago when we started doing it, but here we are.
Maybe you can describe a little bit, what does it feel like to take then, something you're running at your table and then you decide, okay, we're going to publish this. Just for somebody out there who's thinking about publishing, what are some things that kind of decision entailed?
Okay, well, so once we made the decision that it wasn't just going to be for us, that we were going to put it out there, even if it was just going to be some PDF on the internet, we knew that let's just say that we're a little bit perfectionists. Audrey is a graphic designer and web designer, and honestly, great editor and writer. And then I come from a creative writing background, and I've been doing a lot of homebrew. I used to run a blog that provided Pathfinder homebrew for free over their open gaming license back whenever, in the late 2007 to 2012 thereabouts, and so we both kind of came from a background where I guess we kind of had a feeling of how to take it, but in this particular day and age, you're in a space where there's so many resources on the internet, and so many people willing to show their stuff and show where they're at, and also see what is successful and what it is that people look for in a product. That when we made that decision, we sat down and we were like, okay, so we have to design our book to be unique and hopefully stand out and come across the feel that we wanted. And then we knew we would need art. We knew we would need to hire artists and get a bunch of art, because in our experience, art sells books. To be entirely honest, if you're going to publish, it's almost a necessity to have some good art, at very least on the cover, if nothing else. And so we started contacting artists and we started commissioning, and then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to write it so that anybody who didn't have the context of our personal gaming table could pick it up and play it and go. And from there, all I can say is we did a lot of drafts and a lot of editing to get to that place. And there wasn't really a grand secret to it other than that.
What did you learn from running a Kickstarter?
we learned a lot about how to deal with our timelines and how to deal with taking care of a lot of people. We just are finishing up shipping like the very last of the packages out now. And while we've hit all of our deadlines, some of them were pretty tight. And in the future, we probably would give ourselves more time. We also learned that a lot of tabletop RPG Kickstarters end up starting when the book isn't totally done. And that was something that I don't think either of us realized, even though we probably should have. Like we'd backed such Kickstarters in the past, so it seems silly now that I think about it. But we were in a place where we had published the PDF of our book 6 months before we actually did the Kickstarter, and we had to take down the PDF while the Kickstarter was going. But it was an interesting experience on that front. And honestly, other than that, it was a hard to describe life experience with a lot of things happening at once. And having help was the make or break it for us. We pulled in a lot of our friends to help kind of manage the various moving pieces, and we couldn't have done it without them.
So what would you tell somebody if they're going to start running a Kickstarter? What would be the main thing you would tell them? Social
media campaigns are going to help you, and you should start a few months in advance. You should sink some money into some art first, because your page makes a big difference. And if you make a succinct video, it really does keep people attached to your page and more willing to back, I think. So that would be my advice for how to do it on the front end. On the back end, my advice would be, if you end up with more than 200 books to ship, maybe you should consider backer kit, because it was a rough couple weeks.
Meaning you just had so many orders?
Yeah. So we ended up shooting for a fair amount of 7,000, and we ended up about 32,000. And so it was like what we expected to be shipping versus what we were actually shipping was a lot different. And that won't be true for every Kickstarter, but it's just one of those things that I don't think, while we were able to handle it and do all the shipping and take care of it ourselves, it would have been a lot less stressful to have something like backer kit to really help us out.
I guess just back to the game a little bit. I'm sure I can guess a few of your influences, because you've mentioned Star Wars and Star Trek and Cyberpunk and stuff, but I always find it interesting to see what people maybe are reading or watching when they're creating things. What were some of the influences that you definitely wanted to, like, where did they come from, and like what did you want to put into this unique world that you were creating?
Well, one of our big goals was to pay homage to everything that we love, which Audrey and I are avid readers, and we've been into sci-fi for a very long time. And so we wanted to pay homage to that, but we didn't want to just say, okay, well, here's how you do this, and, take something that exists and just be like, well, now it's in our game, for, multiple reasons. But the idea was to create a world that we wanted to enable you to play all of those fanciful dreams with, inspirations, everything from your Hitchhiker's Guide and your or Saga or The Quantum Thief or Blade Runner, Cowboy Bebop, The Fifth Element. These colorful worlds that have been imagined in the past, and be able to facilitate your own adventures that are going to be able to capture those feels without stepping on their toes. And we spent a lot of time, especially with the species and the cultures of them, trying to find a ground of the familiar but also something new, or the familiar but also a twist of something different, to make them feel unique and refreshing, but also kind of evoke a sense of familiarity. And honestly, like everything from podcasts like Wolf 315 or 369 and musical albums, like I can't tell you enough that the Hanadarians as a species were inspired by Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie and whatnot, and like that glam rock look.
I guess kind of another big question. There seems to be, when you take fantasy elements like magic and then technology, what were some challenges with kind of mixing magic with technology?
Well, the problem with magic is that if you're doing magic in a high fantasy way, it does basically everything for you. And that's really the core design issue. So what we ended up doing with it is, for the most part, we didn't add a lot of magic to the system. Outside of the species and the flavor of the magic and whatnot, much of the magic that you'll play with in Spaceships and Starwyrms is the same spells and spell lists that you'll sling around in regular 5th edition D&D. And some of them have been changed. Things like the invisibility spell and the teleport spell are a little bit different because there's a different scope of things going on. Teleport is already a very powerful spell, but technically, if you read it, you could be teleporting from planet to planet. And that's something we wanted to leave out of Magic's hands and bring that a little bit more to technology. And so the other half of it is that there's a lot of magic spells that if you have ample technology, those spells just are fine. Like they do the thing, but so can this device that I'm holding. Like, who needs to cast a sending spell to say 25 words to someone no matter where they're at, when I can just send them a text message? And so it kind of went both ways, where as we added more and more technology, there was almost like a sense of duplication. But I think it worked in our favor, because when we were building our setting, we knew we wanted to have these magical dominated cultures and these mechanical dominated cultures, and the game would be about the blend of them. So, of course, there's going to be a spell for this thing that this mundane technology can take care of, because two different cultures both brought those things to space, and now they're blended together. And so, does your character use one or the other? Well, that's up to you. It's all about how you want to creatively interact with the world. Some of the biggest challenges design-wise, as far as implementing magic and how it interweaves with technology, was definitely figuring out how magic was going to work in space and in spacesuits and in spaceships, and also how things like, how does a camera interact with invisibility, right? Or how does infrared vision that you can get from cyber eyes interact with invisibility? So like the invisibility spell ended up being tweaked such that it essentially, maybe at one point in the history of the Nakora galaxy, the invisibility spell could be seen by infrared vision. However, since then, those tricky mages, they figured out how to shift it so that it also messes with your thermal, so you're invisible to those too. So it's one of those things, because there's definitely magics now that they're just less important to have, and we just felt like at the end of the day, that's okay, because we're in a sci-fi galaxy, and somebody is still going to want to be able to do that thing by magic anyways.
Well, where can people find the book?
So right now, we are up for sale. The book is on sale at drivethrurpg.com. You can find us by searching on their site for Spaceships and Starwyrms, or on just Google Spaceships and Starwyrms. Or you can find it at you can find the link to it at our website, which is hopepunkpress.com. The physical copies of the book, the print-on-demand option, will be up sometime in the next couple of weeks once we get the last of these packages sent out. we want to make sure that everybody who was wonderful and backed us and participated in the Kickstarter gets their physical books before we put them up for sale on drive-through. But before the end of this month, they will be up there.
Okay, and then I will go ahead and put links to the book and your website in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. What does the future hold? Are you making now the supplements or modules, or how is that going to happen?
Both, actually. So the other part of the Kickstarter was the release of the Galactic Primer on Natural Environments, which was a supplement book that had a couple of new augmented classes, the Plane Shifter and the Survivalist, which is our take on the Druid and the Ranger, as well as our Monster Bestiary. It's got, I think, 117 space-related monsters and other new beasties to deal with, including giant critters to fight while in your spaceship. Next year, we'll be looking to release another supplement, probably sometime closer to December. And in the meantime, we have one module already out called the Eternia, and we will be looking to release 1 to 2 more modules next year and keep going on that front as well. We have plenty of ideas, and we want to keep expanding the Nakora Galaxy, and the Adventure Pass, the Adventure modules are a prime way to do that and kind of help people get into what the Nakora is all about.
Ben, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this interview with Ben today. As I mentioned during the episode, I have provided links to Spaceships and Starwyrms in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. Please head over there and check it out. Now, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free and you will get 10 free dungeon maps. Plus, you will never miss an episode of this show. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I am having a blast putting these episodes together. I enjoy talking to each and every one of my guests, and I can't wait to talk to more fascinating people. However, it would be a great help to me if you would consider supporting the show on patreon.com. If you could head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and check out the different support levels there, it would mean the world to me. Every bit of support that I get on Patreon just lets me know that I should continue making this show. And guys, I really want to keep making this show for you guys. I am learning a ton from my guests, so I know that you are learning a lot as well. So again, if you would just even consider supporting the show on Patreon, why don't you head over there to patreon.com/dicegeeks and consider supporting the show. Now, I thank you so much for listening today, and until next time, keep gaming.